Very good afternoon. Can I have this mic button, please? Hello? Okay, great. Now, first of all, thank you, madam, so much. It is such a vibrant energy what we receive in the college, and normally going to the hospital and passing the positive energy to the patients in the college, receiving the positive energy. So that's a wonderful experience. Great. Okay, now see the clinical setup initially, the practicing dietitians will agree with me that initially it used to be the macronutrient distribution, how many calories and how many grams of protein per kg body weight, and that calculation used to be there whenever the patient would come to us. Now the scenario has changed where people straight away come to the OPD setup and they will, directly they'll say, ma'am, I want to have the vegan diet or I want to follow the keto diet. And nowadays people are coming saying that, ma'am, I just want to be off I want to be on a gluten-free and rice-free diet, and kindly let me know how I can incorporate millets. Even day before yesterday, a person who had undergone the hematoma surgery and he was posted for the second surgery, it is posted in the next month, and he came with the son, and the son was worried without any clinical complications. Only he wanted to make sure that he's out of surgery as early as possible. He was insisting that I want to replace entire diet only by millets, nothing else in the diet. And son was very, in fact he started following, and he lost some sudden 5 to 7 kgs already. He was towards the thinner side, and then because he wasn't aware exactly what to follow, how much to eat and when to eat, and somehow actually that more than giving the relief, it created the problems for the patient as well as for the relative, because that was challenging for the family also. So whenever as a dietitian we are approaching to the patients, we should have a holistic approach, at the same time practical approach. So I'll quickly go through the presentation. Who is managing? Actually, next slide please. Okay, next slide please. Now millets are there since 4,000 years. Like, it is not that suddenly they have come out of the blue moon and Narendra Modi ji has advised and suddenly people have started taking. Millets have been the part of our diet since 4,000 years. And because everybody is aware about it, that because of Green Revolution, the rice and wheat was replaced. The millets were replaced by wheat and rice, and suddenly now the kitchen pantry, the health conscious people are replacing wheat and rice again with the millets. So the only concern what normally as a dietitian we face is, first of all out of the blue moon, different names which actually common people are not aware of. So suddenly they feel it is something which is complicated, something which is not readily available. Next slide please. Also cooking habits, not sure how to cook, and that's how the acceptance is. They want to follow, people want to follow the millet diet, but practicality is a concern. Now when we understand the concept of bran and germ and endosperm, we understand that actually this is, all the millets are actually the power-packed grains, and in fact I call it as millet rice because it is nothing but the rice, but in the different form with the different functionalities. Next slide please. So if we see, it is not something which has come from globally to India. In India, so many states we are having which are regularly producing millets. But because of the low demand, somehow it was, it was on the back seat. Now suddenly people are becoming aware about it. Next slide please. So you all are aware what is negative positive. So basically ragi, bajra, jowar has been the part of our diet regularly, and these are the neutral millets. They may not benefit that much, but they don't harm also. Positive millets is something which little bit better fiber content, and they definitely have the protective action against many different clinical conditions. And negative millets like wheat and negative cereals actually like wheat and rice because as a dietitian we are concerned with what? We are concerned with the glycemic index, glycemic load, fiber content, and which can play the role in a positive as well as negative role, negative manner. Next slide please. So when we go for the pricing aspect, if at all we see more or less the price of the millets are actually double than what we have been paying for the regular cereals which are there at the part of our kitchen pantry. But if at all we consider the portion is, how much portion is used. For example, rice we may use around 30 to 90 grams suppose for one particular person, and millets can be sufficient with 30 grams because of the high fiber content, so satiety is more. So even though the prices are little high, but if at all we have the regular monthly calculation as such, they don't go out of the budget. Next slide please. So abhi now when we talk about brown top and barnyard and little millet and all those things, these are the millets like Kangini, Rala, then we have Kodra. So these are the millets which we know in and out, but somehow we don't use them. So if at all, the only as a dietitian what I expect, what we should be doing whenever we are contacting the patients, we should make them comfortable, in the sense we should make them familiar with the names first of all. If at all we say you use you use foxtail millet around say 25 grams, then they may not come next for the next visit. So we have to make sure that we make them familiar with the names, and for that we should be familiar in fact with the names. Next slide please. So whenever we think about the theory part, all the 11 systems which are there in the body, each and every millet has some positive effect on some or the other system. We will be taking the question answers for the lactation and the pregnancy diet, but the example is during pregnancy, Kangini is something which is extremely useful for the nervous protection of the nervous system, and actually it helps in the development of the brain and the nervous system of the baby. So when the mother is pregnant, if at all she is using or having Kangini, either rab or kanji kind of thing, it has a very good result. So if at all these systems have been covered with the help of the regular usage of the millets. Next slide please. So when we think about nervous system, psychological disorders, okay, the neurons are so well protected, and emotional stability, actually I have not done any research as yet, but since almost, I would say almost over a period of 6 months, many patients on their demand and sometimes on my need, I have transformed them on the millet diet slowly and steadily. But I have observed that apart from other lifestyle changes, this has given lot of even emotional stability, because it is not as a dietitian, it is not a role only to plan the carbohydrate, protein, fat. When we have the holistic approach, we do advise what kind of physical activities are needed, what kind of emotional exercise. I do advise on the meditation and other aspects which are required. So if at all we have this kind of holistic approach, we actually can give 100% results in the management of the diseases, in the prevention of the diseases, and sometimes even the reversal of the diseases. Next slide please. Next slide. Next slide please. Okay, now the challenges. Suddenly changing or replacing the cereals with the millets is not at all advisable. We have to make sure that we are doing little at a time. So by any chance clinically we feel any particular patient needs to be on the millet diet, or he should be replacing the cereals by the millets, we should advise them initially to start with plain kanji, because overnight if everything is replaced, then the digestion is a major concern, and because of the high fiber content, and then it is used for 1 or 2 days, and again because of some discomfort it is forgotten about. So including slowly, first in the kanji form, you might have heard about the fermented kanji, what we call as ambil. So in that form, slowly steadily in the form of dalia, and then in the form of rice, was what I mentioned as a millet rice, and then it can be made into flour and prepared in the form of chapatis and dosas and other options. So if at all, instead of adding all millets in all 3 meals, 1 meal of the millet, 2 meals with a regular routine, and slowly steadily replacing depending on whatever clinical requirement is there. Then as I mentioned, we should be training to the patients regarding the names of the millets, where they can actually, we can have, I have prepared a small PPT in the sense, maybe 2-3 slides, where what millet, what is the name of the millet, what is there on the internet, and what we locally call it. So they can actually go to any mart, whichever is available nearby, and 2, 3, 4 visits, they will get used to it. And then that will not give that phobia, maybe something, something new has come in the kitchen. I'll take just 2 more minutes. Okay. Cooking method, obviously, because of the abdominal distension, because of the high fiber content, soaking, roasting, then soaking for 8 to 10 hours depending on the season, and then cooking is always advisable so that the acceptability is more. And food psychology. Food psychology, for example, you'll agree with me, any South Indian person asked to stop curd and asked to stop rice, will they agree? No. Little curd rice is mandatory. So stopping everything and suddenly adding millets, not advisable. People have some psychology of food, some connection with the food, so we can replace slowly, steadily, and continue whatever near to their heart, but considering the clinical condition. Next slide. So our role as a dietitian is on the preventive, predictive and proactive basis, where I just mentioned about the processing, and just one example I would give about, see, combination is something we speak about cereals or millets creating acidity and cough and all those things. So if at all we have the right combination, there's some from the Jalgaon area, a combination of what we call as kalnachi bhakri. So what is kalan is basically the combination of jawar, some whole urad and some fenugreek seeds. It does not cause any kind of acidity or abdominal distension. So if at all we work on those combinations, depending on how is the person's physique or digestion capacity, that will help. Next slide please. Next slide please. So I'll not go through the recipes, because you can go to the last slide now, because I had such a wonderful, actually I didn't want to have lunch, but since madam insisted, I tasted, it was actually amazing. So you all are experts, so I don't want to go into the details. Just go to the last slide. I'll end the presentation with last slide please. You can skip those 3-4 slides. Actually it is last slide. Okay, so basically I wanted to end the session saying that if at all health conscious person has to think about replacing the routine by the millets, that is first thing. Secondly, as a health professional, we have to make patient comfortable rather than saying yes and no for particular things. And thirdly, we have to, instead of concentrating why number of cancer patients is increasing and why hypothyroid cases are going up, instead of concentrating on that, if at all we concentrate what is in our hand, that will be definitely beneficial for the patients. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vaidehi, for that beautiful address. We'll take the questions in the panel. May I now request Dr. Eileen Canday. Dr. Eileen Canday is the Chief Dietitian of Sir H.N. Reliance Hospital. Like I would, in one single line, I would like to say she's actually an encyclopedia of nutrition and has done some brilliant work in nutrition path breaking. So over to you, Dr. Eileen.
Thank you very much, Nasreen. You've always got beautiful words for me. Hi friends. How are you all? Can I have the my slides uploaded? In the meanwhile, I'll ask you all some questions. You all know we have seasons, right? Yeah, and we, in nutrition and dietetics also we have seasons. Like, if we start talking about omega-3, then like omega-3 everywhere, and then that becomes the magic, magic solution to everything. So when we started talking about probiotics, we felt probiotics is a solution for every disease, including depression and anxiety. Similarly, we started talking about vitamin D, and then vitamin D became the next magic pill, till we understood its toxicity also. So similarly, this year has been announced for millets. So it does not really mean that millets is a magic pill, but you have to understand what it is, how it has to be given, what are the pros and cons. And why I am saying like this is because I am dealing with core medical nutrition therapy. And when I deal with core nutrition therapy, I get a lot of references from the gastroenterology department saying that my patient has got intolerance. They come with the intolerance list and they have like huge number of intolerances. And in that intolerance list, there is everything else but millets. So what happens is, because there is no millets in that intolerance list, they all switch to eating millets, not knowing that that list was actually not made by India. So they, when they did an intolerance testing, they did not even include bajra jawar. So it will not even come in your intolerance list. And what the patient feels that yes, now I can eat this because it is not in my non-intolerance or it is not in my list which I can eat. And therefore they start eating these kind of foods unknowingly which may not tolerate them. So let us look at how these millets we can include in our hospital settings. Next slide. Next. Okay. Lot has been spoken of what can be done with millets. We can go to the next slide. Similarly, what are the different types of millets? Next slide, please. Okay. So in our hospital setup, where do we use millets? First of all, the question is, do we use millets? Now, in our hospital, yes, we do use millets, but there are other technical difficulties why all hospitals cannot use millets. Not because of any other reason, but especially looking at medical nutrition therapy, when it comes to controlling certain disease conditions like diabetes, we do explain to the patients how to eat millets. Why? Because one, it has a low glycemic index. Secondly, when it is combined with other foods, the glycemic load of millets and other foods are also better compared to eating just by themselves. So it does have an effect on the glycemic index, glycemic load. The third thing is that there is a high satiety value. So when you eat, at that time you may not feel that it is really heavy or you feel too full. But you wait after half an hour, 45 minutes or 1 hour post eating millet-rich diet, you will really feel very heavy and full. So you have to train, we have to explain and train the patients how they have to eat the millets. So that's how it helps in diabetes. Coming to other diseases like heart diseases or organ transplant, we also know that we give patients immunosuppressants and we give patients other foods which will help them come out of it. So because one is because of the fiber content. Next slide please. We give patients millets also in cancer and other conditions which the patient gets admitted for. Coming to digestive health, we know that because of it being high in fiber, we do prescribe it to the patients. And but there are both pros and cons with regards to digestive health. We'll come across it in the next slide. We have to be very careful when giving millets to whom should we not give millets to. So especially when we are giving millets, if we are giving millets to patients who have got Crohn's diseases, who have got ulcerative colitis, diverticulitis, or they have any intestinal obstruction because they cannot digest it for it to move very smoothly. We do give millets to most patients, but again, patients whose electrolytes are compromised. In hospitals, we have patients with different electrolyte conditions, and they sometimes, because of the high potassium content, also we have to understand whether we have to give it to them or not. So that decision has to be taken. Next slide. So what do we do with millets in the hospital? So let me give you a small example. When we started our menus, when we started our hospital, we were so excited about giving all, lovely dishes and made of millet. So we started planning our breakfast cereal. So we had, like that time we had a 7-day menu cycle. And every day we gave one porridge. So like one day was a ragi porridge, one day was a bajra porridge, one day was a mix. You know what happened was, we very enthusiastically gave it to them, but then we started getting complaints. Now what were the complaints? oh, my patient has not eaten because he's not used to it. He has never eaten in the past, so he has not eaten breakfast today. Please exchange it and get something else. So we cannot introduce a new food to the patient when he's sick. Because when he is sick, at that time he wants to eat his comfort foods. So we, at the same time, we don't want them to, and then it became like a lot of wastage. Even the kitchen started complaining and started telling me that, we are not, there's no demand of this. People are not asking for it. We are making it and we have to throw it out. So those were the challenges that we faced when we were making millets as a breakfast cereal. Then what we did was we tried to use millets in our doctors' dining areas. So instead of just making roti, sabzi and the millet porridges, we started making salads. So like a bajra salad, which is very hit in our doctors' dining areas. We also make certain dishes for patients which has millet, but it is in combination. So what is the combination that we give to the patients is, we tell them is to 3:1. So in this 3:1 combination, we add say 3 parts of wheat or any other grain, and we add 1 part of the millet. And that's how we do a mix and match. Millets are also available in puff forms. So the jawar puff, bajra puff, these are very good. Reason being is that they are better digestible. They can be made like how you make a sukha bhel. That way it is just tossed in a big pan with curry pata and rai, jeera, and that puff tastes quite good. So you could have a single puff like a jawar puff, like an evening snack, or a bajra puff. There is another way of eating millets also, what I explain to the patient. You get most of them love to eat poha, right? So, and diabetics are very scared of eating poha. So when they eat poha, what I tell them is to have the flakes. So you get millets also in the form of flakes, which is like a poha. I get questions as to, I can't eat it, it is very chewy, can't chew it well and all those things. So I just ask one question to the person opposite me, that do you treat all the pulses same way? Would you treat a rajma same as a moong? No. So that similarly, you cannot treat even your millets in the same way. Some require more processing, some require less processing. Some require to be soaked with excessive number of water, with excessive amount of water, compared to the others which may just require washing and cooking. So you have to also understand how your millet has to be cooked. So this is how we started inculcating millets in our hospital setup. Next slide. Like in soups, stews, salads. Next slide. Okay, these are the typical things that we can make in the hospital. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so there was another issue which we had in the hospital, is the supply chain. So now very enthusiastically we started a jawar puff, or a bajra puff, or a 7 millet puff, which is like a sukha bhel. After some time, I got a query that it is not available. The suppliers don't have it. Why? Because there is no stock available because of seasonal deviations and seasonal variety. So therefore, when we start on a commercial basis in a large setup like hospitals, the supply of these millets is very restricted, sometimes based on seasonal. So that could be one problem that could be faced in a hospital setup. And yes, I think I'm almost done with it. And next slide. Yeah, ready for the questions.
Volunteers, can we have the chairs, please, for the panel discussion? In the meanwhile, I'll request the other panel members also to join in. We have a very young, dynamic dietitian, Miss Lavina Fernandes. Lavina is associated with the Sion Hospital, and she is a part of the pediatric ward, has been working there since 10 years and has done some exemplary work with Sam and Ma'am. Welcome, Lavina. We have Miss Zamurrud Patel, she's the convener of IDA Mumbai chapter. We all know as one of the best renal nutritionists across India. Welcome, Zamurrud. We have Miss Vibha, Hasija, a very dynamic professor from Nirmala Niketan College of Home Science. And Vibha has done some fabulous work at the college and a lot of work in gut health. Both Vibha and Eileen are also part of the National RD Board for IDA. So welcome Vibha. Eileen and Vaidehi, may I request you all also to please join. So we're going to begin with our young colleague Lavina. And Lavina, you can come here, no worries. So a lot of work, especially, with millets and malnutrition and hidden hunger. So your comments on them.
Yeah, so hi everybody. India, especially Mumbai, is facing a triple burden of malnutrition, that is undernutrition, overnutrition and hidden hunger. So basically when I want to talk about malnutrition in pediatric age group, so we first need to focus on the first 1,000 days. So what is the first 1,000 days? The first 1,000 days is when the child, it's from the conception till the child is 2-year-old. Now why it is important? The first 1,000 days are very important because this is the time where the child's growth and development is maximum. So during the first year itself, the child's birth weight triples and the height of the child increases by 50%. And the 80% of the brain development happens till 3 years of age. So that is why, and when we are talking about brain development, the cognitive, the memory, everything is involved. So this first 1,000 days is not only benefiting, if you give a proper nutritious food during this first 1,000 days, it's not only benefiting the child in the present, but also improving the future of the child. Okay, so that is why first 1,000 days, so Vaidehi ma'am has already spoken regarding the breastfeeding and why it's very important during the pregnancy, how it is improving, how millets are beneficial in pregnant women, and how it is benefiting the weight of the child, the growth and development in the womb. And obviously the another important part of the first 1,000 days, other than exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months, is adequate and proper appropriate complementary feeding. As per the NFH's 5 data, only 9% of children from 6 months to 24 months are getting adequate diet. And the prevalence of SAM, severe acute malnutrition, is very high in this age group because of faulty complementary feeding habits. I'm sure you all must have also gone and you all must have counseled children and the mothers, and the first thing when you ask about the complementary feed, they must be saying dal water, rice water, and these are not adequate for the growth of the child. So early introducing millets in form of amylase rich flour has shown to be very nutritious for such children. Okay, so what is amylase rich flour is basically you have to soak the millet, let it germinate, and then roast and make a flour of it. So it's like a ready to eat flour, so you have to just cook it and make porridges, pancakes and laddus out of it. And obviously when we are talking about millets, we also need to focus not only on millets, we also need to focus on fruits and vegetables. So obviously with all these recipes, this can also be incorporated. So
Thank you, Lavina. I think ARF weaning foods, gradual increase of weaning foods and introducing millets, I think great points there. My next, so taking it from there to Vibha. Vibha, what is the role of millets in gut health? Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Nazin, for that question. So, when we look at using millets for the gut, So one is to look at absolutely the intestine itself and diseases of the intestine if you're looking at clinical conditions. The very obvious is the constipation, which we absolutely know with the soluble and insoluble fiber. The very obvious is also the gluten-sensitive enteropathy, where this is naturally a gluten-free flour. I mean, in the West, they have to make a gluten-free flour, which we have also kind of adopted, which is tapioca-based and starch-based. But here we have this entire range of gluten-free flours, and so we need to kind of advocate it like that. Also, some work is done with irritable bowel syndrome, where this is also low FODMAP. So maybe if we look at reading about low FODMAP from Western literature, some of these millets may not feature there because that's not there at all and it's not been documented. But this is one of the areas that we can explore, especially with irritable bowel syndrome. Also, some work has been done with ulcerative colitis with use of millets, mostly germinated millets. So one of the very common things that we use for ulcerative colitis is germinated barley product. So that is, though it doesn't come in the regular, we don't use it as much, but that's where we can think of. And similarly, like a germinated barley product, we could think of germinated millets for ulcerative colitis because that causes healing of the ulcer and reduces intestinal inflammation. And work has been done with ulcerative colitis with finger millet that also germinated. So these may be some intestinal clinical conditions that we can look at. Apart from that, what millets, the prebiotics which are there in millets, what it confers is it changes the bacteroidetes and firmicutes ratio, which it's increasing the firmicutes, which actually reduces the intestinal inflammation. And some aspect, a lot of this is animal studies which have been done, but what has been seen is apart from reducing the intestinal inflammation, also it prevents or can take care of liver injury in such conditions. So this is another aspect. Also, the phytochemicals which are there in millets can confer, that also helps the gut bacteria and therefore it reduces inflammation. So there's more actually, but then this is enough for a start to kind of...
I think excellent inputs there and a lot of work, especially gut being the second brain, and I think definitely we can explore millets there. So Zamurrud, my next question is to you, and when you talk about renal health, is millet controversial? Can millet be had? Is there any specific millet you would like to emphasize on?
So first submission that I have been using millets. I'm practicing renal nutrition for almost 25 years now, and I've been using millets for last 25 years. Okay, but one thing that when I have said that it is not for all patients. See, each patient is a different individual. Okay, his requirements are going to be different. So one size does not fit all. And as I rightly agree with what Vaidehi and Eileen were saying, that suddenly this year we've woken up that millets are good. But as nutritionists, we know from the time actually I have studied here only in this college, from the time I came to this college that millets are good. In fact, as a child also I have eaten millets. So there is nothing new for us. But yes, today the emphasis is on because it's a forgotten food for us. But in renal conditions, you have to be little careful when you're prescribing millets. So one thing, high potassium is one of the complications that you see in chronic kidney disease patients. But all patients do not have these complications. So if your patient does not have these complications, you can use it. The common millets that people know are jowar, bajra and ragi. Okay, and definitely these three millets you can definitely use in your patients. Even if your patient has a high potassium and he wants to eat it, it is your task to incorporate a small portion in his diet, because you have to do your calculations for potassium. How many milliequivalents of potassium you are going to be using it. And again, you know the processes as nutritionists, how can you leach it out. So it's not a complete no that you cannot use it, but yes, having said that, there are some people who are on drugs which will increase their potassium in the blood. ACE and ARB medicines which are used for their proteinuria and for their blood pressure control. So when they are on those medicines, you have to be little careful because it's not your food that will increase the potassium. It is the medicine that will increase the potassium. But the medicine is going to be needed by the patient. You cannot stop it. What you can stop is the high potassium sources from the food. So you just need to pay attention to that, and you can definitely make healthy patterns for your patient incorporating millets.
So Zamurrud, there is a very interesting news. In fact, when you were just going through the recipes, there is this one young student who has made a kodo millet, kodo and beetroot millet popsicle. And I think kodo millet is a very low potassium food and especially used a lot by peritoneal dialysis. So I think great innovation, students. I think you all can keep doing, and especially on water retention. If you have the popsicle, it also hydrates your mouth. So great innovation on your end. Thank you, Zamurrud. Eileen, yesterday, ma'am, this question is for you, which we didn't answer yesterday. So Eileen, what is the contraindication of having millet, especially for thyroid patients?
Okay, so understanding millets also come with a lot of phytic acids, and they come with anti-nutritional factors. They come with anti-goitrogenic substances as well. They do block absorption of iodine. So when talking about thyroid, at that time we have to also see to it that whilst we give thyroid friendly foods, we have to avoid foods that will prevent certain iodine absorption or other things. So that's a very important. Whilst we look, one side we give selenium for a person who has a thyroid issue, and on the same side, if we give things that do not make the good things absorb, then we are contradicting our own statement. So we have to be a little careful with people who are consuming thyronorm or thyroid medications.
And you also had one slide on anti-nutritional. I know I rushed it, so you can just cover that now.
Yeah, so yes, these anti-nutritional factors are the same thing, which are substances like phytic acid and other substances which kind of prevent the absorption of certain minerals. It could be phosphorus, magnesium, calcium, and that could, we may be consuming foods rich in those substances, but at the same time, by having excessive millets, we could prevent its absorption, and therefore, in all, actually we are not doing anything good to ourselves. So, as we always say that moderation is the key, which Vaidehi also very rightly pointed out, that don't include it in all the meals, but you should know which meals. Like when you're taking a thyronorm, don't include it somewhere close to that. Have it at another time which does not interfere with the nutrients. So here we look at the drug-nutrient interaction, food and food means nutrient and nutrient interaction, and all those things have to be also taken into consideration.
I think excellent input. That, ma'am, does that answer your question? Any more questions? I'm not going to ask any more questions. Yes.
Ma'am, so I'm having two questions. Yesterday's question, I believe, still is left unanswered. Can bajra be eaten by the thyroid patients? Is bajra advisable? That is my first question. Second question is, now we are coming across the fact that only one millet has to be consumed at a time. So instead of opting for ragi and a blend of multiple millets, we should opt for single millet because it is tough on the stomach. So what is your take on that?
See, I think it's very individualized. Although person A may tolerate a single millet at a time, but I have had people who are having 7 millets at a time and still they digest it very well. It is based on your digestive system capacity rather than considering or giving a blanket statement like for everybody that do not mix the millets. In fact, I also sometimes propagate them to use at least 3 grains in one atta. So what I tell them, instead of doing just the wheat atta or wheat and soya, I ask them to mix wheat, soya and another 2 more of the millets, which makes the grain a little more in terms of lower in the glycemic index, increases the glycemic load of that particular meal, and at the same time I understand the digestive capacity. Like this advice I will not give to a 70-year-old, but I will give to somebody whose digestive capacity is very good, who has no other pancreatic or enzymatic problems otherwise. So that has to be understanding. So understanding what we would say in Ayurveda, the prakriti of the person,
Yes.
and then advising is important.
Ma'am, you have a question. Yeah.
But I want to answer to her. Pearl millet is specifically goitrogenic.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
vata. So the use also per millet, that is.
Right.
Per millet is per
Is
millet.
bajra itself? Yeah.
Yes.
That was
I
my
want to
question.
ask for hypothyroid, the one who takes thyronorm, then which millets is good for that person and which is not beneficial? Like is there any demarcation between these millets?
Okay, so here in this case, even if you're taking thyronorm and if you want to eat millets, the main thing is to keep a gap in the timing. Don't eat it very close to your medication. Therefore, when you take even thyronorm, where it is any other food, you take it on an empty stomach and you don't eat anything for half an hour. And all again depends on what is the level of thyronorm you are taking, whether you're taking 50, 100, 150, whether you're having other issues with it, or by taking even, I'll give you an example. Suppose you're taking thyronorm 25 and your levels are controlled with that, and you are eating like a jawar bajra roti every day and it is not affecting the levels, I think you can go ahead and eat. Similarly, it's diversing from the main topic, but we do this same thing even for patients who are taking warfarin, who are on vitamin K. We tell them don't eat vitamin K rich foods, but if their PTINR is normal, even after they eat one bowl of leafy vegetables, we allow them to eat the leafy vegetables. Similarly, if your thyroid, T3, TSH and levels are normalized, even though you're eating a jawar bajra roti every day, we do not tell you to stop eating it.
Okay, you need to think about your last wrap-up line,
Dr.
and I'm
Madan
going
wants
to
to
give the
say
mic to Dr. Madan. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add to that. I think this question has come a number of times, so I am just wanting to add to this. See, when you process millets, even yesterday it was mentioned, when you roast it, when you soak it, when you steam it, a lot of anti-nutrition factors which are there get substantially reduced. So that's also an aspect which needs to be kept in mind besides whatever has been said. Yeah.
I think if you looked at some young startups outside, I think a lot of work has actually been done on sprouted and malted millets, and I think that's a great thing because you've already taken care of all these anti-nutritionals. In fact, it's adding more value and also increasing the shelf life. Yeah. So last wrap-up line, Vibha, will begin with you. What do you want the audience to take home, especially on gut health or anything else? You've done a lot of work on cognitive health.
I just want to say that when the opportunity is there from the government, in the sense has announced, we have the International Year of Millets, and millets actually have been forgotten over the years. We need to bring it back. The more and all the difficulties of eating millets are all to be handled. I mean, there are solutions for everything. So as long as nutritionists, we can provide the solutions for all the challenges which are there for millets, which we are right now perceiving. At that same time, if we are able to talk more about millets, it's going to help the health, it's going to help the country's economy also, and it is sustainable also. And I think in this period of our human evolution and our evolution as nutritionists, for us sustainability is definitely a key issue, and we have to look at it seriously. So therefore, I am looking at nutritionists having, let's call it diet versus a combination of dietetics and advertisements, because pasta was also not something which is from us, but how nicely we have adapted to it. Which means that we need to get people, that is we, nutritionists, need to get people to start thinking in the same excited way about millets, with counteracting the anti-nutritional activities aspects, and which also means that recipe formulation with the processing that is required is actually our forte. We have to develop it, and we have to identify not just the macronutrients and the fiber and the micronutrients, we have to also evaluate and identify how much of prebiotics is there. Because there was one study which was done with the prebiotics of fermented, I'm done.
Yeah, sorry, ma'am, you will have to allocate this entire panel one entire day. It's really not fair. Now I'm just rushing them, and I am extremely sorry. We've had the next two panels already come here. But we promise you all that we're going to do this entire thing with IDA and SPT one whole day.
Next day will be 6-day events.
Right. Ms. Zamurrud, your last takeaway statements.
I think millets are important, but portion is also important.
Lavina? No, that's okay.
So coming from a government hospital where our patients can't afford buying, so this is the millets, so it becomes a bit of a limitation for us. So as an organization, we should advocate, including millets in midday meals, ICDS structures, and also in PDS system.
Thank you, Lavina. Vaidehi?
Just two things, the way we do the nutrition screening for the patients, same way we can do the screening at the OPD level also, where we know what are the habits what person has been having. And secondly, as a part of the integrated medicine department, I would like to say that it is not just, we cannot diagnose patient is having Pitta Prakriti and Kapha Prakriti, but somebody who is expert who can do that, we can add on considering our nutritional knowledge. So it's a combined and team effort, what I suggest.
Superb. Eileen, your last takeaway?
Just as how the world learnt yoga from us, I think they are also learning to eat millets from us. We have things like puffed millets, flaked millets, and so many other millet products which are like already processed. So I think that's the way to go.
Thank you so much. You have been a great panel, and thank you sorry for rushing you all, but you all are great friends. So thank you, and I hand over the session to Anuradha ma'am. Sorry about the quick wrap up.
Thank you.